Hi everyone and welcome. In this recording I'm going to be speaking about this upcoming total solar eclipse in the sign of Sagittarius taking place on the 4th of December or the 3rd of December depending on where you are on the planet. And without a shadow of a doubt, this is going to be a very powerful celestial event, not just for the simple fact that it's a total solar eclipse, but it also holds some really intense celestial conversations with other power players. And also, this is a South Node eclipse, and usually the South Node is a representation of that which we have accumulated in great excess, so it needs to be released. A very famous occultist, specifically Cornelius Agrippa, saw the nodes of the moon as a dragon. The dragon symbolically is the sheer force of karma. The North Node is the head of the dragon, and the head is very significant because it has the eyes, it knows the direction, it steers the body of the dragon, it thinks ultimately, and of course that is where the mouth is, and the mouth is used to nurture, to feed, to consume, to ingest energies, lessons, understand this symbolically. The South Node, however, was the tail of the dragon, which also represents, and I'm so sorry to use this term, but it is what it is, the rectal area. So it is the excrement. It is that which it has to release because it already assimilated that which it has eaten, which it has consumed. So the excrements need to be unleashed. But at the same time, if we just look at the tail, it is very important because it provides balance. And where I'm going with this is that usually solar eclipses, which are really, really powerful karmic new moons, represent new beginnings, of course. But when it is a South Node eclipse, that new beginning also, on one hand, requires a powerful release, and it can also represent that it's built on assimilation, so the wisdom experience, the lived experience of the past. And this in itself makes it that much more profound, that much more significant, and it really requires a lot of wisdom. It requires a lot of soul level and psychological maturity from us to direct it in the right way. Usually eclipses are very strong karmic forces when the veil between the worlds is that much thinner. So that means it's more of the divine will manifesting itself. So usually we already had our input, if that makes sense. It is not much we can change at eclipses. But because this is a South Node eclipse, it very much depends on how we alchemized. Of course, depending on which area of your life, 12 degrees and 22 minutes of Sagittarius falls in your own personal chart. So experiences regarding that area of life, how we alchemized it, how we turned it into wisdom, naturally what our aspirations, our goals are, what our objective is, what is within our will. And the will has to be purified. The will has to be seen and known and interpreted for what it truly is. Hence, all the digging in the past. And this is why this eclipse was preceded by the Scorpio season and this past Taurus lunar eclipse, which was very, very revelatory in the most painful manner for most of us. But this is where that pays off. We needed to be aware of all that the lunar eclipse revealed to us, pulled to the surface, as painful as it was. We are living in a moment where it is exactly that pain which is the most valuable experience, because that is sheer wisdom. That is reflection of what we don't want. That is reflection of everything that we suffered and worked for. That is reflection of what our fears are. But ultimately, the pain just wants, screams for soothing, and that soothing is a future where that pain is no longer very acute, where that pain has a meaning, where we no longer fear it, we integrated it. So it's just a memory, it no longer hurts, and it no longer triggers us. Now, also, before we get into the specifics of the eclipse, we have to take a look at where it takes place, so the sign of Sagittarius. The sign of Sagittarius is very notorious for its expansive qualities. It is the part of the sky which has to do with our philosophical thinking, with our deepest wisdom, with our most profound knowledge. And many times that knowledge can be empirical, but in other times it is much more non-linear, non-rational. Hence, it also rules religion, for example, and it has to do with travel, long-distance travel. It has to do with justice and the law. And from a very personal perspective, our own subjective truth, because that is the law in our lives. It is also the home sign of Jupiter, so it is extremely faith-oriented, if that makes sense, because everything that has to do with the sign and expression of Sagittarius, if we dig real deep, we can still find the faith at the core of everything. For example, let's say long-distance travel. Let's travel. Where's the faith in that? Well, the travel itself, the journey, has to do with an aspiration, and because it's long distance, we have to believe that we can reach that destination which is long distance. So let's say 500 years ago, a long distance travel was full of risks. Even today there can be some risks attached to it, but today maybe it's much more faith oriented in the sense that when we travel somewhere significant, well, what does it mean to us personally? Why are we wanting to go there? If it's, for example, like a business trip, we have a lot of faith in the business or success of the transaction or whatever it is. If it's like a holiday, maybe it's a dream holiday, we were not satisfied with the location we were at. So where I'm going with this is, regardless of which area of your life the sign of Sagittarius falls into, there is faith there. The animating factor is actually something which has to do with either faith, your philosophical thinking, your worldview, with your perceptions of life, and there is an unbound quality to it as well. So it's very, very Jupiterian in nature. Even if we examine the glyph of Sagittarius, the arrow, for a lot of astrologers, that arrow has wisdom and knowledge attached to it, because that is the strength. Now, in my personal and very subjective interpretation, I would say that it's much more faith-oriented. For example, prayer. That arrow can be aimed at something very specific, but it can also be aimed, symbolically to be understood, at the heart of the divine, at the heart of God, for example. And when an arrow reaches that bullseye, miracles definitely happen, and probably that is the most magical, that is the most infinite quality of Sagittarius, that there is no limit. As long as the mind can fathom it, as long as hope can reach it, as long as the imagination can go there, there is, even if it's just a tiny small chance that it becomes reality. And this is also where the South Node in the sign of Sagittarius is very important, because if it's so faith-oriented, we have to ask ourselves, is our faith healthy? Because if it is, that means we had a lot of doubts, we had a lot of questions, and we had a lot of moments when we were feeling totally lost. And the irony is that it is exactly that sensation of feeling lost, not knowing everything, that makes our faith that much healthier. Because when faith is not healthy, it is fanatical, and human history has so very many bloody pages reflecting what unhealthy faith or what blind faith can actually do, especially the harm. And that is still ongoing now. For example, just this year, the Israeli airstrike. How symbolic was that? The firework, where one faith had to defend itself against the other. But anyway, let's get back to this solar eclipse taking place in Sagittarius. So every eclipse, regardless if it's a lunar or a solar one, always acts like a reset of some sorts. So because this takes place near the south node, that immediately means that we have to either abandon or purge out or release a faith, something that we believed in. It can also be like a perception, a worldview, something to do with how we personally perceive the world or anything that has to do with it. But of course, this doesn't necessarily mean anything negative. Now, it would be actually silly of me to say that, any eclipse is gonna feel great, because chances are it won't. Eclipses usually bring forth moments of tension, moments of crisis. It is basically the reset moment. And especially with the South Node, that means that we will have to let it go. We will have to accept that something that perhaps was extremely important for us up until that moment is no longer working, no longer functional, or no longer valid. So in hopes of us searching for something new, something improved, even if it's actually us who have to come up with that, create it, either way, we have to release that old, non-functional, no longer relevant faith, or vision, or worldview, or perception, or perhaps even knowledge. But at the same time, perhaps this is the challenge, where not everything that we experienced is an excrement. The wisdom and certain experiences which actually confirm, let's say, the meaning of our personal lives has to be the foundation. It has to be there. That is the stability that we are going to be building something totally new up on. Of course, this doesn't necessarily have to be exactly at the moment of the solar eclipse, because solar eclipses can manifest in the next 6 months, over the course of the next 6 months. So we have to basically also go with the flow and see that which wants to birth itself, and we're also co-creators, so we also have to put our input. And perhaps this is the beauty of Sagittarius, because everything there is really a co-creation, and it is extremely expansive. So without a shadow of a doubt, it will expand our mind, it will expand our knowledge, our wisdom, and let's even hope that our faith, maybe our perceptions are gonna be much, much greater than they ever been before. Maybe if we were optimistic until this point, because optimism is a big trait of Sagittarius, now we're going to be optimistic in a totally different way, that which is much more profound. And one of the celestial conversations that this new moon / eclipse holds is a sextile with Saturn, so a conversation of harmony. Saturn is the manifester. Saturn is physical reality. Saturn is, take no BS. Faith is wonderful, but it has to be confirmed. So perhaps all of us are going to be navigating towards the deepest confirmation of our faith, which is also a wonderful co-creation, that which will expand us and make us embrace the future. And that which acts or comes through as a solution to everything that the Scorpio season brought to the surface. That is the cure, let's say. That is which holds the venom of Scorpio at bay. It protects us, it defends us. That is ultimately which will make us feel safe, spiritually speaking, or our highest thinking. Without a doubt, for a lot of people, this Sagittarius eclipse, regardless of where it falls into your personal chart, it is definitely going to lead to new knowledge. It is going to lead to teachers or mentors, or you being guided to embrace something new, like learning wise, perhaps a new qualification that is very possible, especially if it falls into your 9th house, for example, maybe university, maybe a new course, a new professional specialization, or maybe going in much, much deeper into something that you already practice or you already know. For some, it will definitely be the inner call to become teachers, to become basically mentors, to embody the higher qualities of Sagittarius. For others, it will definitely be relocation, but where it might come maybe spontaneously, but for others it will be like the universe will lay out the trail of breadcrumbs over the next 6 months. But spontaneity can also be very well part of this eclipse, because this celestial conversation holds a very, very tight quincunx and in conjunction with Uranus. So basically there's a strong Uranian energy here, and Uranus is spontaneous. Uranus is basically constructive chaos, but it's built on truth. So it has a lot to do with our own personal truth, and sometimes it can be shockingly good, if that makes sense. For example, maybe we have a great talent and thirst for knowledge, but all our lives we were shy. We just couldn't believe that we, X, Y, Z, our names, our identity, would be capable to actually study that, to qualify in that, to get to a much more professional level. This is a very practical example. And the universe might disagree and might reflect back at us. You are actually capable, go and do it, because you already have it within you, so it's not going to be difficult. And it can also shake us out of our comfort zones. But, most celestial conversation in 2021 had this element to them, especially when Uranus was very activated. Whatever happens, well, it also pushes us out of our comfort zone. So this eclipse is gonna be very, very similar to that. Now, collectively speaking, it can have so very many expressions, because the energy, the sign of Sagittarius is that very expensive. For example, this can very well be a new space travel technology built on a fiasco, for example, on a past fiasco, that which didn't really pay off successfully in the past, like technology-wise, knowledge-wise, research-wise, maybe is already revised as we speak, and they get it right this time, and who knows what boundaries it will help us to overcome as a species space travel-wise. It can also have a lot to do with legislation, international legislation, constitution. The South Node is the present legislation, which is no longer reflective of who we are as a nation, even who we are as a species, internationally speaking. So it has to be readapted. That which is no longer valid has to take on a different expression, including in the shape and form of legislation, like an updated constitution, updated human rights, updated anything that has to do with legal matters. Of course, Sagittarius is international borders, international travel. Maybe that will change in a very surprising way. And this is where Uranus comes into play. We can't even anticipate how. It can be very positive and expensive, as in maybe some places will no longer require visa, for example. But it can also be restrictive because it might reveal a truth that we cannot bypass in the present moment. For example, terrorist activity can still be terrorist activity, so maybe heightened security checks and stuff like that. It can also be the birth of new branches of science and research, because that is the higher octave of Sagittarius. It is faith and philosophy and all that, yes, but that sometimes have to have a very practical expression, as in stuff which universities teach, research, science, all of that. And maybe some researchers and some big developments in certain scientific branches are going to be due to some crisis that we are facing right now, because that is Scorpio. Before the eclipse, so before the sun is in Sagittarius, is in Scorpio. So that is when it illuminates all the problem, and all those problems alchemized and turned into wisdom and practicality are going to take on the expression of Sagittarius. Also, travel or anything that has to do with travel and borders is definitely going to be part of the theme, because the eclipse is also conjunct Mercury, and Mercury is, among so many other things, travel, but it's also mindset, so it is very, very relevant collectively speaking as well, not just individually. Because if we look at mindset collectively, well, it has to do with media, communication, freedom of speech, and South Node. It can represent the dark side of total liberty, because that means that people are free to lie as they wish, and this will also be very significant. The term lies and deception, manipulation, psychological warfare, if that makes sense, because Neptune is going to be extremely powerful at this eclipse, and Neptune's darker side is lies, deception, illusion in the worst sense possible, so lethal illusion, for example, or escapism with substances. Well, an overdue can cause easily the termination of one's life. This can also influence religion a lot. And the way I see this energy regarding religion is that it can act as a powerful purge where certain sects, certain, cults and spiritual currents which are based on a misinterpretation perhaps of religion, these can be basically purged out. But as any new moon, it also has a creative quality to it, so something else will take its place, but what shape and form is not yet known. But I do have an idea that because of the quincunx with Uranus, it is very, very futuristic, galactic even, that which appeals to a more quantic future, and everyone interpret this as they want. But the beautiful part of its sextile with Saturn, it is in harmony with the traditional. It's not in conflict. It is not a contradiction. It is actually integrating, harmonizing. It gives a much clearer, deeper, updated understanding and expression of the traditional. It updates it, translates it to modern terms, not just modern, but futuristic terms even, in a gentle, in a logical, rational way. So it's not just sheer blind faith, but it makes a lot of sense. Saturn in the sign of Aquarius, intelligence. And it appeals to a lot of people because it's so rational. And it's also proven one way or another. Because Saturn doesn't like just theory. Saturn needs proof. And this can take on, especially from an individual perspective, a big expression, because faith or our beliefs, our life view, our own personal philosophies, why we believe something, if that is proven, well, that means it manifests one way or another, because otherwise it is not acceptable as proof to the rational mind, Aquarius. So this has big life-changing quality to it. It might not feel or seem or come across as something that much pleasant or optimistic or expansive around the time of the eclipse or shortly after, but in the course of the next 6 months, maybe your life is going to change dramatically because your mindset changes, Mercury, because your worldview, your personal philosophies, your take on life and your identity changes. You might be starting to believe in yourself in a way that you could have never ever done before. Quincunx to Uranus in the sign of Taurus. Taurus is fixed energy. Taurus is the way you always have been, that which is totally usual to you, that which was deeply programmed in you as in education, school, upbringing, everything that you experienced. But Uranus is there to create earthquake, shake it up, send it into total chaos. But that is a good thing when it is someone's mindset, when it's someone's belief system, especially belief in themselves and who they are. Maybe life will spontaneously, coincidentally, synchronistically, Uranus prove to you something that you found hard to believe in yourself, especially something really positive. Taurus value, that which makes you very valuable, beautiful, anything that is like grounded, stable value that you can actually take pride in, not to be understood as a dark side of pride, but the most positive expression. And also at the time of the eclipse, Venus is going to be conjunct Pluto, so it might have a lot to do with one's personal power, one's control over their lives and their value system, what they love, who they love, why they love it, and understanding our feelings, our emotions, what we love. That is power. Power over ourselves, power over others, power over our choices, awareness basically. And last but not least, also because of the quincunx to Uranus, this can also represent big earth changes, so that might not come through as something that much welcome, because it can be like earthquakes, volcanoes, anything which has to do with the shaking of the earth. It can also be like an aviatic, I'm not saying disaster, but some unusual event which will raise a lot of question marks and force us to expand our mind, force us to expand, let's say, our curiosity. There are definitely going to be some economic, financial, transactional consequences as well because of the Venus and Pluto conjunction. What loses value? What is priceless? As in, what is even immune to this eclipse value-wise? What is likely to arise as a new value? And prices with fuel, oil, like stock markets and anything like this will show at this time where the trends, where the currents are gonna take for the future. And because this new moon is conjunct Mercury in the sign of Sagittarius, that immediately has prophetic qualities to it. This is a very powerful, premonitory, foresight, anticipation energy, because it activates that part of our being. Of course, for some people, this is much more intellectual, rational. For others, it's much more intuitive. For others, it's much more instinctual, the gut feeling. For others, it's highly spiritual, like prophetic in its real sense. Either way, it will show us where the future is taking us, regarding, as I said, the law, finances, the world economy, what is bound to lose its value, what is bound to gain a lot of value. For example, what kind of cryptocurrencies and technologies and stuff like that. Around this time, because of the strong Uranian activity, it may be the case that real estate and the price of property, land, are gonna either skyrocket or fall dramatically, unexpectedly, for a short period of time. And which way, I'm not sure, because this is Uranus. So we have to wait it and live it. But around the eclipse, we will have this premonition exactly what to do. And another very important element, the sextile with Saturn, it's for our long-term, stable, grounded future. So every foresight, premonition, every anticipation that we can make, or it will just come to us at this time, it is for our long-term future, for our security, for our stability. So this part is so very positive. Just that, of course, Saturn squares Uranus at this time. So that's not an easy energy. That's stressful. So that makes you really brainstorm. Or it makes you really worry. As bad as worry is sometimes, it is actually the worry which forces us, the pressure of it, to overcome our obstacles quickly, efficiently. There's also Mars in Scorpio. It doesn't converse with the new moon, yet still, that is enough in itself to give us a strong ambition, determination, the singularity, the motivation, the desire and longing to go with the flow and not allow any discomfort, setback, minor problem, worry, anxiety, whatever that Saturn-Uranus square can influence us with, to get that much in the way. And at this time, the ruling planet of Sagittarius, Jupiter, converses in tension with Mars. So we are going to be that much more ambitious, almost obsessive a little bit, to get where we need to be finally. This is where the desire for the breakthrough that we need in our lives, and this goes collectively as well, because collectively we need so many breakthroughs, like the COVID situation, the economic problem. Some nations face so much poverty, so much turmoil, so much conflict. So everyone kind of needs a very important breakthrough at this time. So this square with Mars and Jupiter is expansive, so it's extremely tense. But if we're wise, we're using that as motivation, not allowing it to turn inwards, because when a strong desire is not allowed to symbolically breathe, it turns inwards, and that's inner conflict, that's a strong frustration, anger with the self, and that is like a full-blown depression, in the depression understood as Freud did. Repressed anger. Now, of course, there is another very important celestial conversation that this new moon / eclipse holds. It is conjunct the Great Attractor. The Great Attractor is an incredibly powerful spatial anomaly, and you can Wikipedia this and Google it, because in itself it's not astrological, it's actually astronomical, that it can simply distort galaxies around it. It is that very strong. And that is very important, especially collectively, because we attract something for our futures, but something big, something that can even defy reality. And of course we can see it as a bad sign, because, whenever something is conjunct the Great Attractor, life becomes a little bit of a twilight zone. It's beyond our understanding. It is beyond the limits of the human mind, even of the higher self, to be totally honest with you. But that is where we attract that which might be impossible. So that is a miraculous quality to it. And on the other hand, it's very dissolving. So it frees us. if anything can break certain chains, psychological, material, spiritual, karmic, whatever, it is this kind of energy. And on the other hand, it is squaring the dwarf planet Orcus in the sign of Virgo, which, according to my personal subjective interpretation, it is our ancestral DNA. Orcus can be seen as the beast within us. It is a very, very Plutonian kind of planet. Not just because it's a dwarf planet, so it's just like Pluto, but also because it is a symbol of the underworld. So the shadow, the primal, but it reaches way beyond Pluto. If anything, Pluto is the gatekeeper, and Orcus is what is beyond the gate, the abyssal realms, if that even makes sense. But, if we translate it in something non-philosophical and practical, that is our ancestral DNA, the genetic gift that our ancestors left us. But perhaps for our ancestors, and this is where we have to look at ancient civilizations, the things that they accomplished are, some of them at least, are impossible even for us with our technology. That part which determined them or guided them or gave them the power to accomplish that may awaken inside of us, and that will change a lot. So, almost like a DNA activation. Like, let me just give you a very good example. Like the Kabbalah or any kind of ancient wisdom similar to that, regardless of from which part of the world it comes from, well, that is immortal. We study this. Many thousands of years later, we still study it. We see the power in it. We see the wisdom in it. We see even the cosmological interpretation of it. Many of it, of course, is so very integrated even in astrology. And how did it reach us? Well, someone either channeled it or etc., etc. And if that awakens within us, well, imagine what that plus our present consciousness can actually accomplish. So that's why I personally think that this is a big deal, but it's still a square. So it's not easy because that ancestral part of us wants to go against it. Because the beast within us, well, it protects us first of all. It wants to protect us from that which is, and let's not understand it in real terms, that which is alien. So let's say an upgrade or DNA activation, well, it is an alien energy to us because we never ever experienced it before. So the two have to, first of all, learn to be good bedfellows, and then they activate for what they are meant to be. So what I'm actually saying here is that all of us probably are going to experience some very heavy physical symptoms, because the sign of Virgo can also be seen as the physical body, especially digestive tract. So if we experience some physical weirdness, pains, aches, flu-like stuff, and not to be mistaken for COVID, so not the COVID kind of stuff, well, that might be the reason why. And if you might have any planets around this 12 degree, 14 degree of Sagittarius, you might be experiencing this energy very, very intensely. And also what needs to be said is that around this time, Neptune just freshly went direct, so it's out of that retrograde. But it's extremely powerful because the stationary energy still lingers. And whenever Neptune acts this way, especially in the present circumstances, it amplifies all the psychological element out there. The lies, the deception, everyone's misaligned beliefs, everyone's own interpretation of the pandemic and everything that is going on. So you can imagine that there is going to be a lot of controversy, news, truth, half-truth, what is true, what is not true, even lies, and this is where some lies are going to be with intent. So not someone's just misinterpretation and this is how they see reality, their opinion and stuff like that. There is going to be a lot of that out there as well. So it's much better to be detached. It's much better to have the TV, social media and all of that turned off and just give way for this powerful great attractor energy to do what it wants to do for us personally without our minds being influenced or forced to point in different directions. Because where we point this energy, the glyph of Sagittarius, the arrow, is so very important because that is where we're gonna be going. And also with the new moon, where we point the arrow is very, very important because that is planting the seed of intention. But there is also naturally a good side to this Neptune, because Neptune can also be seen as the divine source, as the most wonderful expression of the illusion. Everything in life is an illusion. Our identity is an illusion. You know, the Maya, let's just call it like that. But that also means a very deep connection to source. And if everything is an illusion, maybe this is one of those moments when the illusion asks you, what do you want me to be? Because I'm still there, so you give me shape and form. So dream, but dream wisely. This is where we have to co-dream with the universe. Let's ask the divine, what is your dream? And then when it reveals it to us, of course through prayer, meditation, or our own introspection, our own moments of philosophy, we also add our dreams to it, and we co-create something quite magical, quite miraculous. And that, let's not forget the final, let's say, destination of that arrow, the heart of the divine. If the divine falls in love with the illusion, it makes it permanently real, if that makes sense. What we perceive, what we believe, what we accept as our worldview is definitely what we're gonna get back. Like, if we think about ourselves that we're just flesh and blood, biological robots, basically, then of course, that is what we're gonna be. Nothing beyond that is ever gonna, let's say, contact us or reach us on its own. Maybe if it's fated, maybe if it's karmic, okay, let's say it can break through, but if it's not, then that's all you're gonna ever be. Of course, this is true the opposite way, and this is, for example, my personal example. Live in the ether for a long time, and you will find yourself that you're unable to live in the physical world anymore. So balance, wisdom. That is why we co-create, because we are not that responsible creators, regardless of what we may think about ourselves. And the co-creation is almost like a guarantee from the universe that it's not gonna let us create something abominable, to be understood symbolically, of course. So long story short, I do believe that the evolutionary intent of this eclipse is definitely going to truly expand our minds and our consciousness. And with Saturn in the picture, we might even see proof of that. Or maybe it is actually us who is going to prove something to ourselves, but either way it is for our futures. But of course you may think all of this is wonderful, fantastic, let's welcome it with joy. The intent and where this is getting us is that positive and expansive and optimistic as Sagittarius. But what we're going to be experiencing and feeling around the 4th of November and even a couple of weeks after, but also even in the present moment, because right now we're in the period between eclipses. Well, that's not rosy at all. It's hard, it's weird, it's unusual, it's even maddening at times. But this is the shift. This is one of the most truer and physical expressions of the shift. So many gurus and, spiritualists, pseudo-spiritualists have been telling us that this energy shift, that energy shift, this and this wave of life, that wave of light, that wasn't that much of a big deal, to be totally honest with you. This is where things are actually gonna be getting serious from now on. And the totally scary part is no one can tell what will happen, how it will play out. This is where it's a big enigma and mystery to everyone. And the reason for that is very simple. It's really not set in stone. No one can say how that new reality will glue itself together. So the best thing that we can do is take care of ourselves and at least focus our intent or our frequency, etc. on we definitely want to be living in the future and shutting out everything that might take away our power in the now. But this doesn't just go for this eclipse, this goes for the next perhaps 5-6 years. Especially 2022, because Jupiter is going to be in the sign of Pisces. What we dream is what we ultimately are going to be creating one way or another. And yet another expression of this energy might guide us back to the January 2020 Pluto-Saturn conjunction, that very rare celestial conversation, because Venus is going to touch on that degree at the time of this eclipse. So it's like an emotional activator. What needed urgently to change in your life in January 2020 around that period? And chances are it did transform, it did change. Maybe it was, let's say, eliminated or purged out or whatever. And now this Venus revives that. So the void of what you lost or what was transformed, what was deconstructed, is gonna attract the filler. So you might expect something emotional of nature to enter your life, where that theme was whatever went on in your life around January 2020. You may also be seeing the fruits of your labor, especially from a karmic perspective, whatever you have done around January 2020 once again. And last but not least, this is also something very general, which I do believe every single one of us might experience their own way. As much as their lives are permissive of this, we are definitely going to be learning something new. For some people, it might be as profound as a totally new spiritual system, totally new philosophical system. Some people under this energy are gonna channel a lot and big things. Like they're almost gonna be channeling divine downloads where it's not even susceptible to interpretation. It is direct, as in straight on. Information, facts, figures, or whole systems in themselves. So this is when a lot is going to be created regarding new spiritual knowledge and sources of information. But of course this can be valid in a non-spiritual way. New course, new branch of study, new specialization, going to university, getting that degree, working on that diploma, or simply self-education. You want to learn something and you simply go and learn it. It doesn't really matter how, because what you might be inclined to learn in the next 6 months well, chances are it's going to be very, very valuable in your life. And other people are just going to step up because they already master something profoundly, and they just make the choice to become teachers of that, and that is also a very powerful life change, and that is also another phase in someone's not just professional career, but their whole being. When you're a teacher, you're much more Saturnian, and at the same time much more Jupiterian, because you inspire and you plant the spark of thirst of knowledge into the future generations. So this is what I have to say regarding this solar eclipse in the sign of Sagittarius. Thank you so much for listening. Wish everyone a fantastic and miraculous period. Until next time, bye for now.